Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. I'm your host, PB, and Sam is back. Where were you this past weekend, Sam? Taking in some golf?
I was taking in some golf in outside Charlotte at Pinehurst number 2, watching
Nice.
the world's best play at one of the tougher courses in the world, at Pinehurst number 2 at the Pinehurst Golf Resort. Awesome time, super hot, but good times, great pals, and it can't beat watching some golf. And played 27 holes on Saturday. Got this sick hat from Redbridge Golf Club outside Charlotte. So
Yeah, that's tight. Yeah.
haven't had a good weekend.
Awesome, dude. Well, it's still June. It's still Preview Mag season. We're going to go over the Athlon preview in this episode where they have the Hokies, a bunch of different things, recruiting, some interviews that happened. Yes, there it is. She's a beaut, actually. You said it was aesthetically pleasing, and you were right because I picked mine up after you. Why don't you kick this episode off with a cheers?
Well, my cheers is to we've kind of gotten into the middle part of magazine season. Like they're all published, we've all read them. It's time to start like actually planning football Saturdays. Like I just bought the Vandy tickets last
too.
night.
Yeah.
Cannot wait. Starting to think about, gosh, like I'll take this day off work to get to Blacksburg a bit early. Maybe I could go to this road game. I'm thinking about going to the Duke game, getting friends together for that. Like this is like mark your calendar season. I feel like is what this is. So
It's
cheers
to
to
that way.
cheers to marking your calendars for Saturdays in the fall.
Cheers, buddy. Yes, indeed. So I'm going to start the episode. Just a couple news and notes before we get to the drones interview. Sam put out an article last week on his top 20 teams to watch on the Sons of Saturday website. It was pretty cool. The cover photo was Shador giving a high five to his father, but there's a lot of teams in there that had great descriptions on why you should watch them. Did you have some fun writing that one?
I did. And I really thought about if I have an open Saturday, what teams do I want to make sure that I watch? And then some of the teams that I think are going to be the most important in 2024. So Colorado is on there because, I mean, it's a Deion Sanders, it's Folsom Field, Running Ralphie, like it's appointment television.
Travis Hunter. Yep.
Travis Hunter. Yeah, can't forget about that guy. Florida has the toughest schedule mankind has ever seen. We have, Florida State's revenge narrative, I think, is great. Ohio State, the most expensive college football roster of all time. But then you also have some other ones. I think, Texas State is a team with a ton of offensive talent. They're going to be fun. Liberty, every single game Liberty plays this year will be a playoff game. If they lose, their season is done. So I think that is absolutely fascinating. A ton of fun teams on there. I had to include the Hokies a little bit. Tennessee is on there with Nico. It's going to be a really fun season.
Yeah, it is. And I put out the article the week before on the best ACC game. So those are a couple top 20 Tuesdays that we did. But I think we're going to have another article coming up from Mike with position previews, correct?
Yes, our football analyst Mike Holmes will be putting out position previews up until kickoff. So he'll start with quarterback room and work his way around the roster. Really excited for that. If you haven't taken in any of Mike's content on YouTube, when we interviewed him going over the spring game on our podcast, he does an awesome job of explaining the things that even people who watch a ton of football like you and I, Pete, that we just don't see. And so I think he's really interesting. He'll be honest with you. He's not one of those guys who's just going to, glaze over Virginia Tech. So I definitely would look at his previews. They're going to be some of the most in-depth position previews that you're going to find.
Yeah, that's really cool. It reminds me of French over at Key Play. I think that publication that you wrote for a little bit, and I was
back in the day. I'm
still a Key Play member. Know Joe well. I actually have Key Play t-shirt on, so shout out to those guys. But yeah, on the Liberty note that you mentioned, I forgot to say this. Like you said, every game's a playoff game. They're basically playing an FCS schedule. Like half the teams in that conference are from FCS. I feel like in the last 2 or 3 years.
I think within the last 6 years, because they have Kennesaw State, they have New Mexico State, they have
Sam Houston in there.
Sam Houston. they do play an FCS. They play Campbell.
Okay.
So they
Campbell's
have
a decent team. Yeah.
they have pretty much like a borderline FCS schedule. They do go to Boone, North Carolina to play Appalachian State. And I'll have a top 20 Tuesday article coming out soon of 20 games to mark your calendars to.
Ooh.
And Liberty at App State is one of them. I think that's one of the more important games in the G5.
Oh, they're playing App State this year?
Yes. I'm calling them mid-major. Are we cool with that? I think G5 just sounds weird. So
yeah. And there are such various levels within the G5, and Conference USA is at the bottom.
It's so bad. There's absolutely no reason they shouldn't be in the Sun Belt or the American.
Yeah. It would be a lot more competitive for them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if you're watching on YouTube right now, please give us a like. Please subscribe to the channel. We always appreciate that. Let's get into some of these interviews that happened last week. Drones went on with Billy Ray on our channel, and Pry went on with the Boundary Corner guys on their channel and their podcast. And so we're going to discuss both the interviews. And I want to start with QB1 since Billy did that one. And I didn't have so much to take away. I did note, and I think you said this to me too, that like Kyron seemed animated, maybe like a little bit more animated than we normally see him. So that was cool. And, Billy has an effect on people, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, you'll never have to worry about being the goofiest guy in the room when Billy Ray's on there. So I think he is starting to feel a little bit more comfortable being the quarterback, like being the guy. I think he is starting to embrace that a little bit more. I think it is hopefully comes across as him being a team leader. I know Brent Pry talked about that towards the end of last year and then during this offseason that, he's got to get better and, some of his reads, he's got to get better staying in the pocket. But what they've mostly focused on is him just being a vocal leader along with a leader in his play.
Yeah.
And so even something as simple as like joking around on a podcast, like it shows a little bit of comfort with being in the limelight. And I think that does transition over to leadership.
Absolutely. And when we get to the observations from Pry's interview, there's definitely going to be some Kyron stuff in there. But one of the notes I saw or heard in the interview was him talking about Ali Jennings and kind of taking some of the young receivers under his wing. I thought that was pretty cool. He also mentioned the offense and how he thinks it's going to be more explosive this year. And he even said, can we be a top 5, a top 10 offense? If they want to be, they could be that. Now, listen. That he's biased. He is the QB, but he's also in full control of what we end up being. But I appreciate the bravado of potentially being a top 10 offense because that would be very, very cool. And of course, there was a little bit of chatter about him working out with Cam Ward, his cousin, and Shedeur Sanders in Miami, and that they may be going back to Miami to work out again later this summer. Did you have any other takeaways from that interview?
No, I thought it was interesting how he mentioned Ali Jennings as a guy who has really taken over leadership in that role. And obviously Ali Jennings is like 24 years old at this point, but do you think even we're sleeping on the impact Ali Jennings will have? Because we did come away from that spring game and he would seem to be the lead target guy for Pop Watson's side of the offense. I do think we're going to get to that Vandy game and being like, man, there's a lot of targets going to Ali Jennings.
Yeah, I think that if he had played the whole season last year, no doubt number one receiver, not only in yardage and catches, but also in touchdowns. I just think he definitely would have commanded the ball and dominated the ball and would have had the, the gravitas to do so. And that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit later when we get to the unit rankings from Athlon, when we discuss their preview. But I also, in that interview, Kyron mentioned Aiden Green and Pop Watson as standouts from the spring. And that's another just mention of Aiden Green. I feel like we keep hearing a ton about him. And with Gosnell being a little bit iffy coming off his injury, Tucker Holloway maybe missing a lot of time going into this year. We're not quite sure on that it just opens the door even more for Aiden Green, if he wasn't already busting through it, to have a monster year in that, second, third, fourth wide receiver role.
Yeah. I mean, who was it? Was it Lofton? Who was the guy who ever Justin Fuente was on podcast
for 2
talking
years,
about other players were like, sometimes those things just, you have guys who are gamers and they play well in the game, not as well in practice. Like I think Hendon Hooker was a bit like that.
Absolutely.
I think the next challenge for Aiden Green is like do it on the field at this point, right? I think we're all hoping for it, and we saw some great catches last year. Like his catch in the Tulane game was insane. So I think we've seen glimpses of it. So if he can, you know, if he's that dude and can step into that next role, I think Tech wide receiver room is going to look really good for a long time. I did some Googling here. Tech was at 29.5 points per game last year. So if they scored 12 more points per game, they would crack the top 5.
So you
That's
need
all
to
you got
be
to do.
40 points per game, essentially.
A little over 40 points per game will be top 5. Yeah.
Yeah. But
That's
top
doable.
10 is probably like 35,
Top
37.
Yeah, you got to be scoring about five touchdowns and a field goal a game to
Gotcha.
be top 10. They can do that.
They could do that. They could do that if we continue on the trajectory that we had started at the end of last year offensively, and the defense begins to play better. Because if your defense is playing better, you get more possessions, you can score more points. But the last few notes from Jones's interview, his goals: ACC Player of the Year, All ACC First Team. Said he's not worried about the offensive line at all. Has a ton of confidence in them and their improvement. And he mentioned Mansour Delane, Sam Brumfield, Kelly Lawson, and Stroman when he was asked some less talked about guys who will have a big year. Not that we haven't already been talking about those guys, but I think that some people, like Ollie Jennings, some people are forgetting a little bit about Kelly Lawson and his potential upside, maybe forgetting about how good Stroman can be. And Mansour, while had a great freshman year, maybe fell out of the minds of some people a little bit last year.
Yeah, and I think Tech's defense, there were so many glaring issues that we almost just, pushed the cornerbacks to the side because they were doing so well. Like, I I think Mansour is a guy who could have a big year because of how good Dorian Strong has been. Like guys are not, they know about his PFF grades, they know about his film. They are not going to look for Dorian Strong. They're going to look to the other side of the field. I think you could see Mansour have a few more PBUs, maybe a few more interceptions this year because of the strong play of Dorian Strong.
Yeah, he might get a lot more opportunities to make big plays, and that would be cool for him because I think he's very capable. So let's move to the Pry interview. Did it with the boundary corner, like I said. What were your takeaways? I'll start with you, Sam.
He toes the line so well between like perfectly cliche football coach and just a little bit of spunk to get you fired up. I think it's something that he's really good at is that like pep rally talk while still being genuine. A lot of coaches will go in there and they just try to not say anything wrong. I think he goes there and he does speak his mind and he's candid about things, but I mean, again, he just toes that line so well. It's it's almost unfortunate for those guys that it's such a good football based interview, and the only thing we're talking about is what he said about the uniforms.
It's so true, dude. That's like my most like chunk of notes here was what he said about the uniforms, because Clark put it out on his Twitter. The boys made a video about it. People are so interested in how these uniforms are going to look. And if you look at what Nike's been doing, it's going to be plain. Like, it's going to be very, very plain. Like Baylor, TCU, all these uniforms that are coming out are simple, like very, very simple.
Yep. Iowa State was simple. West Virginia had a little bit more attitude to it, I guess you could say, but
they had that one black one, which was really cool.
It's pretty cool. They're going to be orange and maroon and white, and they'll have a VT on them somewhere.
Yeah.
And they'll have players' names on them. So they won't be full Penn State. They will have player names on them.
That's very true.
We do know that.
And what he said was they're getting back to the roots of when he started at Virginia Tech, like go back to a simpler, more traditional uniform. But one of the better things about his commentary, I thought, was just the way they were deciding on it. Like, oh, do you like this coach? Do you like this? He said he felt like he was at the mall with his wife, like doing like a fashion show. And so that was kind of funny and kind of cool. And
they said they had former players as well.
Right. Former players giving their ideas on the exercise that they were getting into in the discussion. So that was very cool. I just want them to come out so people can stop bitching and things like that. But
Pete, they could go out there wearing hot pink and purple polka dots. I don't care as long as they win the game.
Yeah, that's very, very true. But yeah, I'm excited for them to come out. I want them to be simple. I think some people were mad about the TCU changes because they lost like the frog collar and stuff, which I thought was always unique to them. But maybe they hated it. I don't know what their opinions were.
But I think back to like the LaDainian Tomlinson TCU, and they had the frog right there a little bit.
Yeah, there was something on there. Yeah.
And so I think for them, I can see how the pattern was. They were one of the first teams to have like the pattern on the shoulders and on the neck. So I can see how that's a little bit more of their identity. But Virginia Tech, like to me, it's just the plain with the orange numbers on the shoulders.
Yeah, like we talked about last time. Yeah.
I think the piping was the orange and white piping was a pretty iconic look.
Yeah, the one in like 04, 05, like those ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I love those. I mean, that's when I basically was in school. And so I loved the 99 uniforms, but I love the ones after them too. If it's somewhere in between or whatever, that'd be great. Let's move to just some of Pry's other thoughts. He said he was excited about the wide receivers, said it's the most competitive room they had. And he made the comment that we've kind of made before that, he mentioned that Mines is so good at his job that he gets all this interest from outside schools and they have to keep paying him more and promoting him and stuff, or at least he hinted as such. I thought that was interesting and just being real. And what you were saying about Pry towing the line and doing interviews, I feel like at least with Pry, it's coach speak, but it's not all coach speak. You will get little insightful nuggets about players and other things. And one of the ones I thought was on Curtis Perry when he was talking about his relationships in Alabama. Is that something you picked up on?
I think Curtis Perry is going to be a really interesting guy for Virginia Tech going forward because a lot of the transfers Tech has gotten under Pry have been guys who have 1, maybe 2 years left. Curtis Perry is the first like highbrow recruit that has most of his career left. Yeah. I don't think they've gotten a Kyron is the other guy, but I think quarterback is a bit different than the other positions in the transfer portal. To have a legitimate 5-star defensive lineman come into your program is something that Virginia Tech hasn't really seen ever. And then you're getting him with a coaching staff that is led by guys who coach the defensive front seven. You have J.C. Price and Brent Pry are defensive front seven guys. Your defensive coordinator is a linebacker guy as well. So I think he's going to be a really exciting, interesting guy to have through Virginia Tech because we haven't seen a player with that kind of accolades yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just love the idea when Pry said his relationships in Alabama and how on Penn State he had a defense where he had like 3 or 4 guys from Alabama. And then what he continued to talk about how when Perry came on campus, they weren't sure if they were going to offer him. It was a very much a feeling out process for both parties. And that he asked him a lot of questions like, why are you leaving Alabama? Why do you want to be here? How are you going to handle the locker room and all that stuff? And I thought that was, I imagine true and pretty genuine and like forthright with the fan base telling us like, we didn't know, like, yeah, he's a highly rated kid, but we didn't know until he spent the weekend with us and we got to know him better. And based on how he answers those, NFL draft type questions.
Yeah. It is always kind of like, what's the catch? Why are you doing what you're doing? I think coaches are starting to ask that about the transfer portal because I think at first they were kids in a candy store, right? Yeah. They were just picking up everybody. Didn't really work out. I think now you're starting to see coaches ask those tough questions and understand that, if this guy isn't a perfect fit, I can probably go find somebody else. So I think it's exciting, man. If he turns out to be what they projected him to be as a high school recruit, and I'm not going to blame anybody for not being able to start their freshman year at Alabama or anything. No. So could be fun. And he'll need to be good because Tech's going to lose again. They're going to lose a lot in the defensive tackle room at the end of this year.
One thing I was curious about is what exactly he was going to play because he is a bit of a tweener weight wise. And Price said he's a swing guy, strong side end or 3 technique. And so they're going to basically wait and see like where or maybe they'll use him situationally as time moves forward or he'll get bigger or who knows what, but that's what he said to begin with. To your point that you said before about drones and what Pry had to say about him, he said KD has gained a lot of confidence. Team really respects him. His ability to throw into tight coverage has improved. That was a tangible thing that he said. And so it just feels like, unlike last year where it's like, oh, I don't know, Grant Wells and maybe Drones, and Drones is playing good. And like, it just seems like we have a guy, they feel confident. They're giving him like the proper amount of praise that you would want to hear about your QB1. And so it's all good. You know, that finished listening to that interview. It's not like there was a ton to take away from it, but I felt good after listening to both of them.
Yeah, and you do that, fitting it into tight windows, staying in the pocket a little bit more. Those are things that he, first off, for his own health and safety, needs to be good at as a quarterback. But second, if he wants to be an NFL quarterback, those are must-haves. Like, you have to be able to throw into really tight coverage. You have to be able to sit in the pocket a little bit longer and do your maneuvering in the pocket a bit more so you can be able to throw downfield. So him making those adjustments isn't only big for Virginia Tech this year. I think it's big for his prospects as an NFL guy, because I mean, we talked about it during our NFL draft episode. There's not a ton of quarterback talent in next year's draft. And if Drones has a good year, a lot of NFL scouts are going to be drawn to his physical traits.
You know, you're exactly right. And he's not being talked about as a high draft pick right now. But if you go on a run and, you know, there's a few lists out there that name Kyron as a Heisman dark horse. If he even gets in the conversation, there will be talk of him being drafted and how high that could go, because the opportunity is there. There isn't, you know, this amazing QB draft class. And so it's a good year to have a good year.
It would be a great year to have a good year.
The last one we're going to mention is just the interview that I did with Coach Jerron Gouveia-Winslow on Monday. It was really fun. Sam was still coming back from Charlotte. He wasn't able to join us, but Coach Gouv was awesome. Really energetic guy. Like, I said this to maybe someone else, like, just really excited to have him on our side. Like, I feel like he's a stud. Like, he could really, you know, do something in his coaching career. And he had good insight on his playing career, on recruiting, and on defense, because he works under Coach Prelude with the safeties, but he played linebacker. And so he had a lot of, you know, good thoughts about how the D played last year, where we struggled, why we struggled. And so I encourage all of you to go listen to it. But I am going to play a clip for you guys from the interview right now about recruiting. It's real short.
We had the big man challenge, so big boys were here, which was awesome. You know, so this weekend was super busy. Had an official visit weekend with a family. You know, shout out to Stonebridge. He's from my alma mater in Acton, Virginia. Stonebridge. Got to host them. That went really well. We had the big man challenge, so
about that. Yeah, so you heard what that was, and it doesn't take a detective to crack the code of who that might be. It was Christian Evans from Stonebridge. He's been a target for us. He is a big man. He plays defensive line, and he would be a great addition to this class. And so I'm glad to hear that his official visit went well. If you look at his 247, 10 power conference offers, including Oklahoma and Penn State, among others, like those are pretty good defensive schools. At least with Venables being down there now, I trust his judgment.
Yeah, and for these 2025 guys, I think it's there's a little bit of ranking shuffling that happens like right when the high school season starts, right before the high school season starts. Some of the big schools have like scrimmages and things like that. So something that you have pointed out on your Twitter page that I find really interesting, and the number we need to look at, is how many of these recruits are top 1,000 high school guys. And right now, Virginia Tech has 6 commits, probably going to be 7 or 8 here in a couple of days. All of those guys are top 1,000 nationally. If you're outside of the top 1,000 nationally, you're probably not a power 4 high major player. But if you're inside that top 1,000, like, chances are you have the opportunity to commit. And Tech is 6 for 6, about to be 7 of 7, maybe 8 of 8. They haven't done that in 5 or 6 years. for a
No,
while. I
it's
don't think they did that at all during the Fuente class. Like, we were always taking guys who it's like, we know they're not this high caliber guy. They're just taking up a roster spot. And in the transfer portal, you need those roster spots. You would rather take a small high school class and get guys in the transfer portal than take 20, 25 high school guys. And when 5 or 6 of them, are just going to be back of the bench, back of the locker room guys.
And that's actually a really good point that I hadn't thought much about. Are our numbers going up not only because we're recruiting better, but because these coaches just need to be more selective so they can leave spots open for transfers? It's probably a little bit of both, but I still think if you're bringing in all of your recruits in a class and they're all in the top 1,000, the chances of them hitting is so much higher than if they're outside that top 1,000. It's not. It can be done. Cam Chancellor was 2 stars, we all know, and there's other guys that were very low star ratings that did great. But you got to play the odds when you're taking these numbers and having all of our guys right now and 13 of 16 in the last class being in the top 1,000. That's a good way to look at it. That even if we're not getting 10 4-stars each class yet under Pry, and hopefully we'll get to a point where we can get more of the higher end guys, bringing the bottom up of the class is huge. That's a huge step in the right direction. In 2020, we had 3 out of 16 guys that were in the top 1,000. 3 out of 16. We have 6 in this class already. So you can see where we've come from in 2020. People say that's a small class. This stat doesn't matter per class.
Small. I would not, and I'd honestly say if we talk to Colby or, even if we went all the way up the chain, talk to like Bud Elliott or something, I think they would tell you that the way they adjust rankings for class size is probably a bit antiquated at this point.
It is,
because I don't think a coach outside of the big 5 or 6, out of your Ohio States, Alabamas, Texas, those teams are really going to try to get 20 blue chip recruits out of high school. Like, I think what Virginia Tech kind of needs to do is like what Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have started to do, where it's go really hard after some guys, bring in 12, 13, 14, 15, and then bring in 10, 12, 15 transfer portal guys. That's kind of going to be the key for you to have a very talented roster that can compete with some of these top blue chip teams.
Yeah, because what you need to do is you need to hit. Like, you need to hit on the 3 stars. Like that guy that's in the 900s, you need to hit. You need to hit on the number 800 guy, because that keeps your payroll down, so to speak, right? Like, this is Moneyball that we're playing at Virginia Tech. We can't afford to not evaluate well and hit on a lot of these recruits. But let's go back to the 2025 class. So we mentioned Christian Evans, how his visit went well. Coach Goove gave us that insight. Very cool. He is 14th in Virginia in the composite for 2025. A little bit lower on 247's in-house, but a top 25 player in the state of Virginia across the board. So would be a very nice addition. Plus, he's a big man, which you always want to get. We actually got a commitment last week from Sheldon Robinson. Woodbury Forest VA, he, in his own right, is rated very well on 247, a little bit lower in the composite. So we kind of got an opposite thing going on here with him, but he's the number 16 player in the state, according to 247's rankings. So he's a safety, and 11 Power 5 offers for him, including Maryland, Pitt, UVA, Michigan State. It's a very nice pickup to get a safety like him in the fold.
Yeah, and safety is a position I think we've seen over the past couple of years you need to be deep at, because the targeting will take people out of games immediately at that position, man.
Yeah, and I did have to note we did lose out on Jamar DeLoach for now. He decided to go to Cincinnati, but as we've seen, whether it's later in the year, if Cincinnati has a bad season, or after he plays 1 year or 2 years for Cincinnati, maybe Jamari will decide to, quote unquote, come home, as we've seen some other players do. Dude, it was a surprising loss, though.
I'll tell you two things. One, yes, I think Tech isn't doing as well in the top 15-ish of the state as we thought they were going to do. I think that's plain. Like, Shane Beamer has a house on the Elizabeth River in Norfolk here, apparently. It's ridiculous. He's got the some of the puppet masters in 757 football are big Gamecocks fans now. Clemson does what Clemson does. That's whatever. You're going to lose guys to Clemson. I think they need to do a little bit better. I will say, though, social media commitments mean nothing. They are nothing but a social media post. The NCAA doesn't recognize them. Colleges don't recognize them. I don't even know if the players recognize them. So, man, until a player is suited up and ready to run out of that tunnel in late August, they are not a player. Like even guys for Virginia Tech, even guys who played in the spring game for Virginia Tech, you have to think that that guy could just leave at any moment until they get on the field. That's kind of how we have to think about recruiting now. It's more of a Cincinnati is winning the race right now.
They are.
Tech's going to just recruit the guy harder. Like that's all they're doing. So I think if you're Cincinnati, you would rather this guy wait.
I think by and large, you get that verbal commitment. You got a 90% chance of them signing on signing day. That doesn't mean they'll stay any longer than that because they don't
whatever
have to
signing on signing day means,
yeah.
I don't even know if that means anything anymore.
But it's all percentages, right? Like if they commit verbally, 90% they stay. If they enroll, 90% chance they stay a year, and so on and so forth. But it was a bummer to lose to Loach on the first leg of that race. Hopefully Cincinnati bombs out this year and maybe he'll come back. But that's it for the commitments right now. Just Sheldon Robinson, but really nice pickup for us. And he is in the top 1,000, comes in at 922 in the composite. So just inside, but like I said, higher on 247's in-house rankings. And that's how you would always want it to be. Because I feel like 247 does the best evaluation job on these guys.
If you want a player to watch, Micah Matthews, athlete, Turner Ashby out of Bridgewater, Virginia, dual sport athlete, like legitimate dual sport athlete, baseball and football.
Okay.
It's going to come down to Virginia Tech. I'm telling you right now. And he's going to play both sports. And the dude is insane. Top 10 recruit in the state.
Does he have an announcement date? Not yet, I don't think.
I don't think so. But
there's like 4 or 5 guys that have announcement dates that we're looking at in the next few weeks. And so there's going to be some news, good or bad, leading up here into July 4th.
I believe there's a quarterback out of South Carolina that Tech is looking at. Nothing earth-shattering, but whatever.
We will keep you updated on the next episode when we get back
Stay
together.
tuned.
Here. Yes, we will keep you updated on the commitments, but that's it for now. Just the 6 guys, and I think it's going to start growing here pretty quickly as we move across the summer. Sam, we got to take a break. We're 30 minutes in, and then we're going to do a beer break. So let me just take a minute to tell you guys the Too Deep Hokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Rhoback. You guys know Rhoback. It's the performance activewear for those who crave activity. Sam was craving some activity in the hot weather, but he was well equipped. Had his Rhoback polo. Keeps you cool. And that's no BS. They are seriously the best polos for hot weather. Make sure you go there, load up your cart, use code 2DEEPVT for 20% off your order. They still have the Commonwealth in stock, but they have so many nice ones. And when I was out and about this weekend down the shore, a lot of people were rocking Rhobacks, various types. I saw a Texas Rhoback. I saw all kinds of different ones. So definitely getting popular, and you need to get yours. So use code 2DBT for 20% off your order. Rhoback Crave Activity. For now, Sam, I need to know what you're drinking.
So I'm still working through this pack of Devil's Backbone. I got like 2 more left. I don't think I've done this one on the show yet. I think this is the last one, the 8 Point American IPA.
Okay.
I don't think so. This is the last one that I hadn't done yet. It's only 6.2%, so much less than the other ones.
I thought with the 8 point, it would be 8.0.
You would think so. I don't know why they didn't do that, but yeah, it's a 6.2%. Cool looking can as always from Devil's Backbone. At this point, they just make solid beers. Everything they put out is really solid. I think we're lucky to have such a well-rounded microbrewery in the state of Virginia that you can get at pretty much any bar around here. It's light, it's refreshing. It's an IPA that is hoppy enough to taste like a beer, but you can drink 4 or 5 of these and be fine.
Right.
It's a pretty good one. I think in terms of IPAs, really good 3.75, maybe a 4 if I'm feeling good. So it's It's above average IPA from Devil's Backbone, the 8-point American IPA.
I think I've had that one a few years ago. It reminds me of the Stone IPA I had yesterday at dinner. We had a Rotary dinner, inducted a new president, and I was drinking some beer. And the Stone IPA is it's a good solid one. Tonight, though, I'm having a different Stone. This is the Tangerine Express Hazy IPA. You guys have seen this one. And I like to do beers that I know our listeners can get just about anywhere. And I did this beer on the show 6 years ago. Or maybe Robbie did. One of us did it 6 years ago because it's in our Untapped. But I thought it was time to revisit it because it is a popular beer. It's a good summer beer. I really like the taste. It's a pale ale. Well, it's an IPA with tangerine and pineapple, 6.7%. And it is a hazy. And it's not like those crazy hazy ones that are like almost like thick. It's easy to drink, a little bit higher than what you got over there, 6.7, 6.2. Like, once you get closer to 7, it reduces the number you want to have, but it won't reduce how many you want. Let me tell you, because it goes down easy.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I like this one. I'd probably give it, I think we gave it a 4.0 last time. It's right there. It's waffling somewhere between exactly 3.75, 4.0, but the hazy IPA, Tangerine Express Hazy IPA from Stone, I would recommend it.
Yeah, and I think after this one, it is time. We're gonna go full summer beer for the rest of the summer. So I'm gonna get some fun, fruity, light beers to have.
You getting a Saturday shandy?
Getting a Saturday shandy. Yeah, we need to get some cans of Saturday shandy out here.
You got to figure that out, man.
Stuff.
You got to get a keg or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? I was at the store the other day, and they had my store in town. It's called Wineworks, but they've got really good beer selection, and they also do a lot of kegs. And I'll pull it up as we move through here, but like you could get a keg of Maine Lunch, but it was you know how they have pony kegs, and then there's 1/6 keg. So there's half keg is a regular keg. I think most people know that. A quarter keg, I think, is what they call a pony, and then the 1/6 keg is like the beer ball, as people will refer to it. And I think a Maine Lunch beer ball was like $140. It was like something completely outrageous.
Worth every penny.
Yeah, right. But I had the list. I'll tweet it out once I find the picture on my phone. All right, let's get into this Athlon preview, Sam. And I'm going to start with roster notes. And I actually didn't put this on the list of agenda, so I'll hop into this, and I just want you to react. Montavious Cunningham listed as our starter at right guard. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah.
Nelson instead of Burgos at defensive end, opposite APR as the starter. Peebles and Copeland, not Fuga, as the starters at defensive tackle. Brumfield at Mike, Keller behind him. Jalen Jones at free safety instead of Mose Phillips. Now, I do think Mose fits the role of a strong safety better, but I thought that Mose might be ahead of Jalen in terms of play, and so they try to get him on the field. But it might be interchangeable.
We're flipping that. I made the note. I made the note already. Yeah, I think it's going to be Jalen and Mose.
You mean
I think
Jalen Stroman rather than Jalen Jones?
Yes.
There's too many Jalens.
Stroman and Phillips.
Yes, yes.
From Athlon's perspective, I think they're just going with the guy who played more games and is a senior, so I don't blame them for that one. But I think Mose is going to be the free safety. I don't think it really matters who the other starting defensive end is. I think those guys are just going to rotate. So that might be matchup based. It might be if they want more of a pass rush, they'll probably go with Burgos. If they want more of a run stopper, I think they'll go with Nelson.
Well put.
Offensively, you don't go out and get guys in the transfer portal like Montavious Cunningham to put them on your bench. You just don't do it. So he's starting. It's going to be at right guard. I think we've talked about that this spring. That's just his position. He's going to start there. I think what's interesting is like they have some young guys on the offensive line that were a little bit higher touted guys. Like I'm looking at Brody Meadows, Johnny Garrett, Braylon Moore even I think has had some good snaps. Like they're going to shake up this offensive line during the season, I think. So
Yeah.
get ready for that, because I look at that starting five and I'm like, okay. And then I look at the backup five and I'm like, I could see,
They're
like,
probably all pretty close, right? Not except for at
yeah,
tackle. I think a lot of the inside, like you could interchange those guard positions.
like I would not be surprised if Lathganum starts a game at right tackle. If
Well,
they
that's
find
true
a way
too.
to
Yeah.
get that guy in there, or if they find, like, sometimes it's going to be, I think they'll bring like Caden Moore and put him at one of the guards after an injury or something like that. Like, they're going to mix it up.
Well, I'm just curious
So
as to who the heck is our backup center. Like, who do they have listed as the backup center?
they have Braylon Moore.
Okay, so
And
but then if we lose one of the Moore brothers, I guess will be snapping the football if the other Moore brother gets hurt. But I'm not sure if that's true or who else they've been working out at center. I think it's something we discussed with Colby, I think.
I think what's scary about that too is, for those who don't know, like, the center is the one who calls out the protections. The quarterback will check at the line and stuff like that, but the center is the one who is, identifying the Mike linebacker a lot of the times. The center is the one that is getting guys together and snapping, even its shotgun snap, getting that consistent for every snap in a game and then getting off and blocking or getting off and pulling to the outside is really difficult. And so it's not a skill that you can just, like, you can't just move from, position to position. And I think offensive line guys will talk about how it's, in pass pro, you basically have to flip it like in your mirror if you switch right to left. So switching isn't as easy as it kind of sounds.
Not for center. I mean,
He's
unless you
gonna have to do it.
Yeah, if you didn't play center in high school, I remember when they were trying to teach Caden, it was like, we think Caden can do it, but we're not sure. And we're going to, Rudolph was working with him to see if he could get up to speed on how to snap the football, because it is such an important exchange and it's just not that easy to pick up. So, we'll watch that there. But the last couple notes on the roster, APR was all ACC first team, according to Athlon. So that was kind of cool. And Tucker Holloway, first team punt returner in the ACC, third team punt returner, All-American.
I think, dude, if every time he gets back there, he does something.
I know.
I don't know.
It's a shame that he's banged up, man. I'm hoping that he'll be okay.
Yeah, I think Jalen Lane could do something there too, especially if you have a healthy Ollie Jennings and Aiden Green is coming along. I don't think you have to protect Jalen Lane as much, so you can throw him back there to do something. But yeah, Tucker, man, it does seem to be like he's going to have to do a medical redshirt this year.
Oh gosh, that would be terrible. We do have guys that can step in, but that would really stink for him.
Mm-hmm.
Let me put up this now, Sam. This is the projected order of finish in the ACC. So I have Lindy's and I have Athlon on the screen, and this is when in the office, like, they're the same picture. They're nearly the same picture. We've got FSU number 1, Clemson number 2, Miami number 3. The only differences between the two publications in the top 7 is Athlon has Louisville at number 4, Lindy's has NC State, and it's the opposite for 5. So Athlon is FSU, Clemson, Miami, Louisville, 5 NC State, 6 Virginia Tech, same on both, SMU at 7, same on both. So we are slightly higher in Athlon at 27 as opposed to 29 overall in Lindy's. But this is more or less the same top 7 that we saw in SP Plus, the same that we saw in from you and me when we did our rankings of these teams. So it's people are kind of going here. Actually, you know what, Sam? I'm doing you discredit because I think you had Tech at 3.
I did. In my power rankings, though, they're projecting the whole season, Pete. They're totally different things.
That's true. That's true.
Like this makes sense. I think from Athlon's perspective, and if you want another college football podcast to listen to, the Cover 2 podcast from Athlon is, I think, one of the most informative, and those two guys are really plugged in with some high up decision makers. So when they talk about things, they're not just guessing at them. But they have talked about NC State, and they did a really good job in the transfer portal. They do return some guys, but they're only returning about 3 starters on defense. It's almost a completely new wide receiver room except for Concepcion. Grayson McCall hasn't stayed healthy for a whole year, basically at any point in his career except for that COVID year. So there are some question marks for NC State. I think they're a very good team, but I can see how you flip Louisville ahead of them. And I think they're big Jeff Brom fans. I don't blame them for that either. So given the benefit of the doubt to
They
Jeff
are
Brom,
definitely big. I know Braden is a
yeah,
big Jeff Brom guy.
I'm a little bit worried about it's a non-ACC game, but having your second game of the year against Tennessee's offense and you're replacing them as everybody on defense is really scary.
And the
And
heart and
then they
soul
get,
of that defense.
and I think
You're
they
losing
would rather
defense.
have Clemson. They have Clemson on the road early in the season. I think they would much rather have that later in the season. So that's one thing for NC State.
How big is it for
Yeah.
this conference? We mentioned it last time, but how big is it for this conference for NC State to get a win in that game? Like that would be so big because those are two more or less evenly matched teams in terms of where people think they're going to come in their conference.
Mhm.
And if you can beat the team that's the same as you in the SEC, that would be a major leg up and might help us get a second team into the playoff or a third team or whatever it might be. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but NC State's out of conference games are big. Miami playing Florida is big. Florida State's got a couple out of conference games. Everyone needs to kick butt out of conference in the ACC, basically.
Yeah, and if you want to look at this top 7 in a game that could really shake things up, Florida State travels to SMU. It's going to be a
Right.
really big game, and that's one where if SMU is able to pull an upset, I think that throws off everything. And also,
it hurts the ACC. Yeah.
yeah,
It could, unless if SMU beats TCU, if SMU beats BYU, and then they beat Florida State, SMU is going to be a playoff
there
dark
we go.
horse.
There we go. Also, I think people aren't talking enough about, and this is a little preview of an article coming out. FSU has to play a good Georgia Tech team in Ireland to start the year. Ireland. I think because that game was such a blowout last year with Notre Dame and Navy, we aren't really talking about the impact that a transatlantic travel could have. And so from day one, this conference could be turned on its head if Georgia Tech pulls that upset.
Yeah, and it's always nice to see FSU kind of get it stuck to them. I know they became a little sympathetic last year because they did have the undefeated season and got left out. It would be funny, but it wouldn't be good for the ACC for them to lose that game.
Yeah,
but it would be funny since they're suing the conference if they did lose it.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of opportunities with Florida State's schedule for this season to get real weird real quick.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get to the unit rankings. This is going to be fun here. I've got a couple notes, pulled them up on the screen. I love Athlon because they go through the task of rating every position in the conference against everyone else. And a couple notes here, Sam. Our highest ranked unit was defensive back at number 3 in the conference. 10th in the nation also. So remember when we talked about Lindy's, I think they had our DBs was it 5 or 7 or something? They had us in the top 10 on Lindy's. And now we're in the top 10 on Athlon as well. So that's pretty cool. The lowest ranked positions were offensive line and linebacker, tied at number 9. And that jives perfectly with what we saw last year.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I think one thing that I see on this graphic here, and if you're not seeing it, check us out on YouTube, on the Sun Saturday YouTube page. Pittsburgh, man, what are you doing?
It's really low across the board.
They are bad, dude. They have
the 17th quarterback.
We'll preview. I know. We'll get to this rant, but man, Pitt is bad. And I'm not just saying that because Athlon told me. They're bad. UVA is an interesting one because I think they did return some talent on their defensive line and linebacker core. They feel pretty good about, but they're going to have to find some offensive weapons somewhere. And I just don't know if they have it. They don't have a very good offensive line. I think a lot of people
offense on average is coming in about 14.
They lost so many close games last year, but they still lost them. And I don't think they got better in the offseason. So I think Virginia is going to be an interesting one. Lindy's has them ranked in the 50s. Athlon has them in the back of half of the 70s.
Yep.
So
big
a little bit split on UVA there. Yeah.
So as for the final tech stuff, wide receiver. This is something that we said our wide receivers nationally are not getting the respect, and this is another example. Our wide receiver room comes in 7th in the ACC according to Athlon. There is no way there are 6 wide receiver rooms better than ours when healthy. There is just no way.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
and I think it might have been Ed or somebody else said like, well, those other teams have NFL talent on them, like the Miamis and whatever. Miami's number 1, if you didn't know. Miami's actually number 1 in every offensive category in the conference. They're number 1 quarterback, number 1 running back, wide receiver, and offensive line, according to Athlon. But if you look at the projected NFL draft, top 3 rounds for next year, there isn't a single ACC wide receiver projected to go in the top 3 rounds. So no one on this list has overwhelming NFL talent. And I would venture to say that there are 4 players at least, and I'm not including the freshmen, 4 players, including Aiden Green, Jennings, Felton, and Lane, that could take snaps in the NFL, that could legitimately take snaps. I'm not saying drafted. I'm not saying play for 10 years. I'm saying 4 NFL caliber players in some way, shape, or form, whether it's specialists, whatever. And I don't think a lot of other teams have that. And I think we might have lost Sam briefly. We'll check to see if he comes back. But yeah, I just think 7 as in the ACC is just wrong. Like I don't understand that at all. So QB Kyron Drones comes in at number 6. And I know since it's quarterback position, they're probably taking into account the backup. And Colin Schlee was not on our roster when this went to print. And so that wasn't factored in. And we still came in as the number 6 quarterback room. And so I feel good about us being number 6, especially without the Schlee being on the roster. And I got Sam back here. But do you think that the number 6 spot for our quarterback was fair?
No. See, I'm thinking about like, okay, I understand giving it to DJ, I guess, but like here's the thing with these two is they'll rank DJ like number 1 overall or number 2 overall, and then they'll talk about how DJ's not that good.
I know.
Cade Klubnik is, I think they have him at 7. That's probably right, but like Haynes King throws an interception every other throw,
and he's 3.
Cam Ward.
Yeah, so you're frozen on me, Sam. But yeah, we got Haynes King at number 3, DJU was number 2, and number 4 it's Grayson McCall, and number 5 it's Preston Stone from SMU. So those are all reasonable to be in front of Drones, but I think when this year shakes out, he'll be 5 or better. That's how I would put it. And I'm hoping that our wide receivers, will go hand in hand with that and also be 5 or 6 or better. I mentioned the fact that Miami is number 1 at every position on offense. They also are number 2 in linebacker, number 4 in defensive line, and number 6 in DB. So here we go again with Miami just being massively overrated. Hold on one second. Got Sam back in the frame. It's that 757 internet.
Structure down here, man. We can build a battleship, but we don't have Wi-Fi or cell service.
So yeah, I was just finishing up the thoughts on quarterback and Miami being number 1. Do you feel like Miami having all those high ratings? I know the roster is good, but like, and so much of that goes into this type of thing. But number 1 on every offensive category, come on.
Yeah, okay, so I understand Cam Ward hype. I understand Damian Martinez. I understand at running back. So there's your quarterback or running back. Wide receiver, I think, George and Restrepo are 2 guys who will probably get drafted. So I guess I get that. I don't think they have a ton of depth there, or don't have a ton of proven depth there, but I get it. Offensive line, they do have some NFL talent there, but again, like they don't play that good. And that's the issue with Miami is none of these units ever play that well. They look great in shorts, they look great in practice, and they were really good in high school, but when they step on the field, they don't perform this well. So I'm a little
especially
curious
not
about this
week in
one.
and week out. You might get a good game, 2 games in a row, but then inevitably, and that's college football too. There's a dud,
Yeah.
there's and Miami tends to have more duds than others, at least historically. Maybe Cristobal will have it going this year, but then you have the drawbacks with Mario Cristobal being your head shot caller. So let's move to the UVA observation. You said they were much lower in this than they were in Lindy's, and that's true. UVA comes in at number 16 in the conference. Stanford was last, and Wake was 15th. So no matter where you look, Stanford is last or second to last, basically. And UVA has had a little bit more variance in where their rankings are. We had 5 Miami players on, 4 Miami players on first team, I think. I don't know. They're all over the place. We already talked about Miami. I am curious as to how Cam Ward performs because, we do have like the little rivalry with him and Drones and working out together and being family members. And me and you have mentioned the fact that like he's good, but there are flaws there. And all this stuff that he's the best quarterback in the ACC and he's just going to come in and be a killer for them. Like, I just don't know about that.
Yeah. I feel like his play has not always matched his hype, even since he was coming out of Incarnate Word, out of the FCS ranks, going to Washington State. And he played well at Washington State, but he didn't really elevate that team. Like they were still kind of a 500, slightly above 500 team that struggled in a tough Pac-12. And so he was, I think, like 51st, 52nd in QBR last year. He'll need to play better if Miami's a playoff team. Like he has to be better.
And he'll have
a lot better weapons.
He'll have definitely better weapons. Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth. He got Martinez from Oregon State. He's got Restrepo there. They've got the number 1 wide receiver room. So we'll see how he performs, and we'll find out at the end of September in person. I'm
not ready to crown him Heisman candidate type player yet. He's played college football for 4 seasons and he hasn't looked like that sort of player yet.
No,
he just hasn't. Yeah.
All right. So our schedule, and this is the last thing we're going to talk about before we kind of close things out here, unless Sam has other stuff. Vandy, number 80. And this was another one where they were ranked lower in Athlon than they were in Lindy's by a fairly significant margin. I think it was 15 or 13 spots or something. And then Marshall comes in at 100, a little bit better than Lindy's. ODU, 102, better than Lindy's. Rutgers, 41, better than Lindy's. Miami, 20, about the same. Stanford, 79. BC, 57. GT, 47. These are all pretty close to where they were in the other publications. Now, Syracuse comes in at 52, a little bit higher. Clemson, 15. Duke, 69. Virginia, 72. So we did mention that Virginia was lower. 5 teams on our schedule are in the 70s or worse. Those got to be 5 wins. You got to win those 5 games.
Yeah.
UVA is the best of the bunch of that group of the teams in the 70s or lower. UVA is the best one.
Yeah. I just don't, you can't lose those games. You can't be a big boy football program and lose those games. There's full stop.
And then there's just 4 teams in the top 50. Again, it's Rutgers, Miami, Georgia Tech, and Clemson. We got some close teams because in this ranking, Q's is 52. So they're just outside that top 50. And BC, a game we get at home on Thursday, is 57. Now, if BC actually did well out of conference and had a decent record heading into that Thursday game, it'd be a huge bonus because I'm expecting them to not be that great. But if we could get some juice for that Thursday night game, I am all about it.
Yeah, so I'm looking at their schedule right now. They'll have they play at Florida State in Tallahassee in week 1. That Florida State Georgia Tech game is a week 0 game. So that week 1 is at Florida State. Then they have Duquesne. Then they have at Mizzou. And then they have Michigan State. And then they have a very good Western Kentucky team coming.
That's 1 and 3 before they get to Western Kentucky.
And then before they play at Virginia Tech, they play at Virginia. So I think
that's a toss-up. But
yeah, so that's going to be.
There will be no juice. There will be no juice. It will be all downside going into that Thursday nighter.
I think best case scenario for them is probably 3-3 when they head to Blacksburg.
Yeah.
Realistically.
Okay. Now, if they were to upset a team or two, yeah, maybe. And Castellanos can play. But no, yeah, that's a tough start. That's a tough start to the season for them.
And they lost a lot from a bad defensive secondary, and that's never a good sign.
No.
When you have to replace all of a bad team, all of a bad side of the ball. And
all right, let me pull this off the screen.
when they're not good. They're not good.
Did you see the thing about the naming rights for fields and jerseys and stuff for college players? How they might be allowing teams, or they are allowing teams to get sponsors for. Was it the jerseys, the fields, or both?
Both.
Okay.
It is basically a ruling that would allow something like that to happen. Like, I don't think the ruling said specifically stadium or jersey or something like that.
What do you think the funniest like sponsorship opportunity for Virginia Tech would be on the field? Like, you're looking down at the field, and what do you see? Do you see like a rail painted on the field?
Considering our aerospace engineering program and our quarterback named Drones, Raytheon Field sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of autonomous vehicle stuff at Tech. Like, yeah, we could do some drone stuff for sure.
Oh man. When I'm thinking Southwest Virginia, like, dude, I don't know. I know like Bojangles has been thrown around as like they need to sponsor the ACC as a whole, like because it's so North Carolina and almost Virginia at this point too.
Cookout, I'm trying to think of the mainstays in Blacksburg.
NC State might throw a riot if Cookout sponsors Tech over NC State. Oh man. Raytheon would be like dark comedy funny.
On the jerseys, it's like kind of a different, you're kind of going for something different there. Like, for example, the Sixers I hate it. They're sponsored by crypto.com. It's the worst. I think the Cavs have a decent one. It's Goodyear, right?
Yeah. Local company ownership has been in with Goodyear. So in it, the winged shoe logo, Hermes logo looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks good. For us, like Carillion Clinic, they've sponsored so many things. Like, you could see them on the jerseys, but that's a little bit more on the boring side.
You need to go big. Like, I think you need to go like Fortune 50 company.
Well, you said the thing about aerospace engineering, right? Like, get Lockheed on the freaking field or on the jersey.
Tell you, Raytheon Field at Lockheed Martin Stadium, sign me up.
They got tons of money too, right? Like, come on,
let's go. And
my wife's uncle worked for Raytheon for a number of years. I'll put in a good word.
I mean, there are some big companies that are located in the Northern Virginia area, Richmond as well. McKesson has an office in Richmond. Nova has a ton too with the defense contractors and things like that. There's opportunities there for Virginia Tech. I just don't like, it's never been an athletic department that seems interested in that. It never seems more like something they've done.
It's very Big 12-y to like go after the sponsorships for the jerseys, right? Like,
yes,
the ACC,
it is.
I think the ACC a lot of times thinks they're above things. And so when, like, we just saw the thing about the Big 12 maybe getting private equity stakes, right? And them taking 20% of the Big 12 to invest money in whatever. Like, the ACC, they're never going to be the first to do something like that. Like, that's just not, maybe an individual school like Florida State was toying around with it, JP Morgan money, but not the ACC as a whole.
Florida State is like one bad hair day away from calling up a Saudi Arabian prince or something like that. Like, they are right there.
It's so true, man. How do we make up this gap? Call Liv.
My gosh.
All right, dude. Do you have anything to close this thing out?
Man, not too much. I think we're at a really good point in the year too, where, like I said, you're marking your calendars, you're planning your trips. I know we're planning to be at as many games as possible. Mm-hmm. So if you're coming to some games or you want to, meet up with us, let us know. And we're going to try to do some fun stuff, like some pregame shows like we did for the spring game, be at some larger tailgates. We're trying to do more things like that. So if you have any ideas or that's something you're interested in, please let us know. This is the time of year where we get to planning that kind of stuff.
And I meant to say this earlier. Speaking of fun podcasts, NBA draft is next Wednesday. Our basketball team just put out a video last week of some newer guys working out, looking pretty good. I think I saw Hyzier, I can't say his name, but Hyzier Miller making some threes which that was something that I was getting excited about, talking to Ed a little bit about that stuff. We're going to do an NBA draft show next Wednesday night when the first round is happening. So they're doing the thing now at the NBA where it's not all on one night, just like the NFL. So we've got Wednesday night, I think it's first round, Tuesday at 4 is second round. We're doing a show on Wednesday night with my buddies, big Kentucky fans. One went to Tech, one went to UK. So we're going to get a little Kenny Brooks talk in there. We're going to get some Mike Young talk. We're going to get Wizards pick talk for all you Wizards fans. So it's going to be a little bit, it'll be Hokie centric, but there's going to be some other stuff, just like our NFL draft show, where we talked a little about the Commanders and then we went into the Hokies. So we're going to do that next Wednesday night. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, sounds like a blast, man. I'm excited. I'm looking at the calendar up here above my desk, and I'm looking at this magazine. We're getting there.
Yeah. Are you making your draft board, Sam?
For the NBA draft?
Yeah. Is that something that you would do?
No, and I'll tell you why. I think the Cavs have like a really late pick in the first round. I'm a Cleveland fan for people who don't know. And the NBA has always been, I worked at my previous job. I was very like neck deep in the NBA and stats and stuff like that. And so since I left that job, it's kind of left my brain. Like I've needed to leave it. So
you're not
maybe next year I'll get more in the NBA.
Constantly.
I'm not. I'll tell you what too. And with the Cavs this year, I couldn't get into it because every single game, either Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell were injured. I mean, it was terrible, a terrible year to watch be a Cavs fan.
And it was they were so excited about the year with those two, that backcourt. Like it was, they had a lot of potential. I was actually on Basketball Reference today looking up Pascal Siakam's advanced stats and his BPM and his wins per 48 because he got the max contract. And I'm like, yeah, he really got a max. Let me go check. And Indiana's in that situation where, and this is something you'll get next week too, right? Indiana's in that situation where like, they're not a big market team. They traded for Siakam. It's like what we did with Tobias Harris. Like we traded for him. So you better max him because he'll leave otherwise. And so, and he did play a lot better once he got to Indiana. All of his numbers went up last year, but I don't think Siakam ever got to that level that we all thought he might earlier in his career, where we thought he might be a superstar. He's a very good number 2 or 3, but this is besides the point. But this is the kind of stuff we're gonna go into next week when we're discussing the draft. Because every year, me and my friends, we make our first round big boards for the NBA draft. And so we're going to be discussing that a little bit.
It's good. Go through How are you at your Eastern European pronunciations?
Well, that's the problem, dude. There's you don't have the typical college film that you're used to this year. Will I take SAR number 1? I don't know yet. I still have to do some deep diving on my YouTube big board.
I was looking through this morning before the who was Croatia and Albania played. I don't think I could read a single player on the Albanian team's name. I just didn't know what those letters sounded like together. So best of luck.
This year too, we got Steven Castle going maybe as a top 5 pick. Like this is not a good draft. I'm not trying to disparage Castle, but like in most years, he might not be a lottery pick. And that's kind of where this 2024 draft is, which is, for my Wizards friends and ones that listen to the pod, like I feel bad because they picked like one of the worst years to have the number 2 pick.
Yeah.
And I think the number 1 pick, I forget who it is now, but like they had the lowest odds to get it like ever. I can't remember who has number 1, but anyway, we'll go into that more next week. And then we'll be doing our previews. I'm not sure exactly what July holds. I got to talk to Sam about our schedules and whatnot.
Yeah, we're going to do a 2-hour long Mountain West preview. It's coming up. Just kidding.
Your Mountain West fantasy big board. Do you have that ready? You're a lot more likely to do that than the NBA.
Program power rankings model is a couple weeks away from being completed.
Oh yeah.
So we'll talk about that one. There are going to be some interesting tidbits from that. We'll start betting and things like that. Ton of stuff coming up.
Go back to the beginning of last year. Sam did the first 6 games previews with me last year over the summer. And that was really fun. It was actually our most downloaded show of last year. It was right in the middle of July. And then before the season, Sam came on College Football Monday and we did we went over his power rankings, his home field advantage rankings, all these things. So Sam is doing his own kind of SP plus over there.
Yeah, we are. 9 of 15, 9 of the top 15 made a New Year's Six bowl, and the 4 of the top 6 made the playoff. So
nice. And that's going to be fun when we have a discussion about who's making the playoff, how many teams the ACC gets in, how many teams the SEC and Big Ten get in, and what we think. Because on College Football Monday last year, we both had 3 out of 4 of the playoff teams when we did our projections. But this upcoming year, and we both picked Michigan number 1, and they won it all. But now it's much harder to project that and how the conferences stack up against each other, how the committee's going to view the scheduling. And so it's going to be a lot harder to guess at who makes the playoff, but it'll be fun for sure.
I can't wait, man.
Yeah,
I can't wait for college football bracketology. That's going to break Twitter.
We never had it before, right? Like it's going to be fantastic. All right. That's going to do it for the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Sons of Saturday YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed on our podcast feed, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure also if you could review us on Apple or on Spotify, it's much appreciated. Spotify takes like no effort at all. Like you literally just click and you're done, and it helps us out. And we're getting every week that goes by, we get more and more percentage of our listeners that come from Spotify, which doesn't really matter to me. I just thought it was interesting. Maybe people are getting Spotify. Maybe our demographic is skewing downward. I don't know. But I just, review us on all the platforms. It helps us. And until next time, go Hokies.